Hello, everyone, and welcome to I Wish You Well. We are so glad that you have joined us today. My name is Dr. Barbara Sharp, and this is my lovely daughter.
Tia. We're happy to have everyone here with us today. And over the next several weeks, we're going to have some honest conversations about relationships, not just marriage or dating, but every relationship that shapes who we become. We'll talk about family, friendships, parenting, attachment, which I know is one of my mom's favorites, healing, forgiveness, and ultimately how Jesus restores what has been broken. Now, many people think relationship problems begin in adulthood. They think that started with a difficult marriage, maybe a painful breakup, or a friendship that ended badly. But often, our relationship wounds begin much earlier than that, sometimes as even far back as in the womb. Now, today, we're going to go back to the very beginning, to God's design for relationships, our earliest experiences of connection, and how those experiences can shape the way we relate to others,
Yes.
ourselves, and even to God. So grab a cup of coffee or cup of tea and join us as we begin our journey. Jesus, the healer of relationships.
Very good. Thank you so much, Tia. So, when we open the book of Genesis, one of the very first things we learn is that God is relational. Throughout Scripture, we see the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit in unison. Then God created us in His image. That means relationship was not my idea, it was God's idea. One of the first things God said after creating Adam was, "It's not good for man to be alone." From the beginning, God's design was never about isolation. He created us to know love, to experience belonging, to live in community, and to flourish in healthy relationships. Now, one of the primary ways he established that design was through family. Family matters to God. I remember reading in the scriptures, and he would always say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They weren't isolated, it was always about family. Families were intended to be places where children experience safety, protection, comfort, guidance, and unconditional love. They were meant to be the first place where we learned what matters. Unfortunately, we live in a fallen world. Many of us grew up in homes where those experiences were inconsistent or sometimes absent altogether. That doesn't mean our parents didn't love us. Sometimes it simply means they were raising children while carrying their own stuff, while carrying their own pain, while carrying their own wounds from their childhood. Now, long before school, long before we make friends, long before we're dating, we already are learning about relationships in the home. And we're asking questions. Am I safe? Can I trust people? Do I matter? When I'm hurting, will someone come and comfort me? When I'm afraid, will someone protect me? Those early foundations shape our future relationships and pioneer psychologist Eric Erickson described the first stage of development as trust versus mistrust. Trust versus mistrust is, it starts in infancy. As a baby, I'm crying. Is mommy or daddy going to feed me? I'm crying. Is mommy and daddy going to change my diaper? So trust versus mistrust starts at the very beginning of time, infancy. But I still want to challenge that, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we go on. During the first years of life, babies aren't simply learning to crawl or walk, they are learning whether the world is a safe place. When caregivers consistently respond with love, comfort, and protection, trust begins to develop. So I want to say that again. When caregivers consistently respond with love, comfort, and protection, trust begins to develop. When those responses are inconsistent, emotionally, you're unavailable, frightening, or unpredictable, mistrust can quietly begin to take root. Many adults who struggle with abandonment, fear of intimacy, difficulty trusting others, are constantly fearing rejection. These people aren't weak people. They're responding from lessons learned early in life.
And I
Tia.
think that's such an important point because many of us spend years trying to fix relationship struggles without realizing where some of those patterns first began. We often think that our relationship story starts when we begin dating or we get married or experience heartbreak as adults. But by then, we've already spent years learning what love feels like, what conflict feels like, whether it's safe to be vulnerable, whether people stay, whether our voices matter.
Mhm.
Those early experiences quietly shape the lenses through which we view future relationships. The encouraging part is while those experiences influence us, they don't have to imprison us. God can renew the way we see ourselves and the way we relate to others.
Very good. So, one of the greatest lessons I have learned during my years as a trauma therapist is this: healthy parents don't create perfect children, but healed parents can create healthier children. That's absolutely beautiful. Our children shouldn't have to spend their adult lives recovering from wounds we had never had the opportunity to address ourselves. So when I was in school, I was researching on children born from unwanted pregnancies. And I found this really great article, and I want to be very careful here, and I don't want anybody to be offended, but this isn't about blaming parents. Many parents, they do the very best that they know how to do. Many parents, they are carrying their own pain that they never received help for themselves. This conversation isn't meant to harm or to create shame. It's meant to inspire healing and awareness. But the article that I read, it simply said, mothers, please heal from your pain, sorrows, disappointments before, so that your children don't have to heal from you.
Mm.
Please heal from your own stuff so that your children do not have to heal from you. That was an eye opener for me. So now I'm going to get a little personal. My daughter Tia was a planned pregnancy. I was so excited to be a mother. I loved her before she ever took her first breath. The problem wasn't that I didn't want my daughter. The problem was that I didn't know how, or I didn't know the first thing about being a mother. After Tia was born, her father disappeared. He removed himself from our lives, and the wounded Barbara surfaced in a very real way. The joy I felt during my time of pregnancy, the first few months of your life, it kind of disappeared. I became overwhelmed, emotionally unstable, and deeply disappointed that the love of my life had just disappeared after giving birth to Tia. Now, if I want to be honest, I was emotionally unstable before I even gave birth to Shatia. But I simply believed that once her father and I got together, we would be a really just a great, happy family. All the pain and the emptiness inside of me would somehow disappear. I thought love with him would heal wounds that I had never addressed. It doesn't work like that. We just pack up those wounds and we take them with us as we travel through life. So when he abandoned us, something inside of me broke, and although I never physically left my daughter, I abandoned her emotionally. I wasn't fully present. I gave her over to my mom. I genuinely believe it was the best thing for her at that time. I thought I was making a loving decision because I knew I was not emotionally healthy, not enough to care for her in the way that she deserved. But love and emotional health are not always the same thing. At that time in my life, I was carrying wounds I didn't even recognize. I had experienced deep seated rejection. I had experienced emotional pain. I carried a lot of insecurities and hurts that I never processed because I simply didn't know they were there. I kind of knew I had some issues, but I didn't know how to fix them. And I was hoping that, being with your dad would be the answer.
Yeah.
But it only added more pain to the picture once he abandoned us.
And magnified what was there at
Yes,
the same time.
yes. Because I was, like I said, emotionally unstable before I gave birth to you.
Right.
But that event took it even to another place.
Yeah.
So, like I said, looking back now, I realized something I couldn't see then. Although I loved my daughter deeply, my unresolved wounds influenced the way I related to her. Children often experience the effects of wounds um, from the parents who never had the opportunity to heal. As a therapist, I have conversations with especially daughters, and they have these fractured relationships with their moms. And again, this is not to blame mom, but usually mom has her own stuff that she's carrying, and it transfers, it shows up in the household, it shows up in how the parent relates to her children. So children are incredibly perceptive. And so Shatia is going to speak about her experience as, growing up with mom at a very young age.
Yeah, so when I look back over my childhood, um, didn't necessarily doubt that my mom loved me. Love was there, present, and her taking care of us and providing for us. But at the same time, I could tell that there was an emotional distance that was present as a little girl that I couldn't understand or explain during those stages of my life, but I could definitely tell that something was off. And as children, we don't necessarily have the vocabulary to articulate that, hey, something feels emotionally disconnected here. We simply just feel it. And as I grew older, I could have allowed those experiences and those feelings to become the lens through which I viewed my mom for the rest of my life. However, as I got older and I began to form my own relationship with the Lord, He began teaching me something different. Now, and as I myself also went to school for psychology and social work and learned all of the different theories and perspectives, and I also learned about detachment and emotional development, trauma, and healing, I began to realize that people often give what they have. Mm. So, if mom, okay, which she gave what she had the capacity and
To
the
give.
understanding to
Mhm.
give me as well as my sister, right? So my mom wasn't waking up, I believe, every day and trying to wound me. I don't believe that that was the case. She was doing the best that she could while carrying her own wounds and her own burdens and her own hurt that she herself never fully healed from. And that realization didn't erase my experiences, but it replaced the resentment or the unforgiveness or the bitterness that had begun to develop in those formative years with compassion. It helped me to understand that two things can be true at the same time, that a parent can genuinely love their child and still have areas where their own unresolved pain affects the relationship between the child and the parent.
Mhm.
And one of the greatest gifts God has given me has been the ability to see my mom not only as my mother, but also as a woman, as a daughter, as a person who needed healing just as much as I did. And as Jesus brought healing to both of us, he didn't just restore two individuals, he restored a relationship.
Oh, that's beautiful, Tia. I remember Shatia talking about, even as a little girl, sensing that something's not right. As she said, she was perceptive. She kind of recognized it, even though she couldn't put words to it. But there's an event that took place in her life when she was a little girl. I will never forget it. You want to share that about being in your room and crying?
Yes, this was when I was probably around 12 or 13 years of age. And at night, I would often cry myself to sleep because I felt unwanted, unheard. I thought, well, what's going on? My mom wasn't the only one who had caused emotional pain. My dad did as well. And even though mom was present and I saw her each and every day, and we lived in the same household, again, as I mentioned, there was still that emotional distance. So at night, I would often cry myself to sleep because, again, of feeling that emotional distance. And there were times where I would cry and say, Lord, why doesn't my mom like me? Again, I knew, she loved me, as her daughter, but the liking there where, hey, what's going on, Tia? How's school? Or, just those mother daughter relationships that, some of us know through, other friends or other family members and even
Mm-hmm.
on TV. Like for me, I like the Huxtables. I thought that that's the ideal family there, the Cosby Show. But I digress. But so yeah, I had nights where I would cry myself to sleep, and one night in particular,
Mm-hmm.
I was crying and I was sobbing, and my hands were covered over my face. And when I took my hands down and I looked up, I saw this just like this awesome glow, this awesome pure white light. And I looked and I'm like, what is that? And then I saw a hand stretched out to me. And I immediately knew, whose hand that was. And as I've shared with my mom, I said, I came to realize two things in that moment with that most awesomest experience that I've had to date in my life. I said, one, I said, wow, God is real. And two, he loves me. So in those moments where,
Wow.
again, I felt, unloved, didn't like me, no one heard me, God heard my cry. He stretched his hand out to say, "Hey, I'm here for you. I love you. I care for you." And that left a lasting impression
Mm-hmm.
in my heart, for the rest of my life. Now, I went on and did, my own thing throughout the course of my life, but that forever changed, again, me knowing the existence of God and his love that he has, not just for Tia, but for all of us. His hand is stretched out to all of us.
Thank you, Shatia. I have never forgotten that. When she told me about that, I thought, oh my goodness, that is so special that he heard her cry and he responded to her cry. And I've never forgotten that, and I will forever remember that story. So, again, the conversation we're having isn't about blaming parents, it really isn't. It's about understanding people. Every generation hands something, to the next generation. Sometimes it's faith, sometimes it's resilience, sometimes it's unresolved pain. The beautiful part is that healing can also be passed forward. When we become aware of our own wounds, we begin changing what future generations experience. That's why Jesus is so important and central to this conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
He demonstrated his love for Shatia when she was 12, 13 years old in that room crying. He demonstrated his love to me also in a way it took some time for me to receive, but he is forever present. He doesn't simply forgive our sins, but he heals our heart. He restores relationships, he breaks cycles, he gives us the opportunity to become the parent, the spouse, the friend, or family member we may never have experienced ourselves. Healing does not erase the past, but it can absolutely transform the future.
Exactly. Yes. And one of the things I've learned is that understanding someone's story, it doesn't excuse the hurtful experiences, but it gives a lens, gives some insight and explains the person. And explanation opens the door for compassion. Because when Jesus began healing my own heart, I found that forgiveness becomes less about pretending nothing happened and more about refusing to let that pain have the final word. I also realized something else, that every generation, as my mom says, passes something forward. Again, faith, it could be wisdom, sometimes it's fear or unresolved pain, but healing, as mom said, can be passed forward as well. That's one of the reasons I'm so grateful that we're having this conversation together. Our relationship today, it isn't perfect because we're not perfect people. It's healthier because we both allowed Jesus to do a healing work in both of us. Mm-hmm. That's the hope we want to impart in people to hear. That no matter what your family's story has been, Jesus still writes redemptive stories.
Beautiful. And thank you for joining us today. And we're going to explore next week how our early experiences shape the way we relate to others, ourselves, and to God. God bless you.
God bless you as well. And we hope you tune in next time for the second series of Jesus, the healer of relationships. See you next time.